eventually you're going to be held accountable for your actions, even if it's SHTF. What's going on, folks? Justin with 1791. Thanks for watching. In honor of America's 250th birthday, we've been working on an SHTF preparedness video series. It has been inspired by the movie The Patriot starring Mel Gibson. One of the scenes that comes to mind that really kind of prompts what we're talking about today is the scene when Benjamin Martin is kind of living in the swamps with his ragtag bunch of colonial militia, and they're just kind of in between fights, and they're kind of taking care of just whatever they got to take care of. They're tending to wounds, they're cooking and preparing food, they're talking amongst each other and just kind of blowing off steam and relaxing. And if that's not an SHTF survival situation, I don't really know what is. Now, Benjamin Martin is actually based off of two real-life characters. He's based off of Francis Marion, and he's based off of Robert Rogers. Francis Marion, his nickname was the Swamp Fox. If you haven't read the book, The Swamp Fox, I highly recommend that you do, because the real-life version of Benjamin Martin, which is Francis Marion, he is a pretty interesting character and brilliant. So the comments in some of these videos that we've been doing in this SHTF preparedness video series have been very interesting. There's been a ton of people that have either just flat out agreed with what I was talking about. There's been some people that have respectfully disagreed with some of the things that I've said. One dude in particular, I want to go ahead and call out his name because he's been super fun to engage with in the chat. A dude named Operators Anonymous. He vehemently disagrees with my stance on LPVOs. That's fine. I've seen some of his content, and it sure looks like he does a lot of LPVO work, and that's awesome. You know what I mean? LPVOs really do offer a superior shooting experience compared to the ACOG. I'm not going to disagree with that one iota. I have run many LPVOs in the past, and I'm still trying to give them a shot today. Right here, I have my primary arms PLX-C. I have it currently dismounted from a rifle right now because I sent that rifle somewhere for testing. But this guy right here is actually a pretty nice LPVO. But at the end of the day, this is just more fragile and it's more complicated to use versus an ACOG. So that's really not the point of today's video. I just wanted to say that the comments have been very interesting. So we're going to crack this nut from two different angles. First, we're going to talk about a normal everyday life self-defense context, and then we're going to talk about an SHTF condition type of context. So starting off, for everyday civilian life, you need to survive, right? What do we need to survive? We need to go to work our job, make money, pay bills, take care of the family, mow the lawn, volunteer in the community, all the normal things that you got to do for everyday life just to kind of get by and survive, right? And in normal everyday civilian life, if there is some sort of deadly force encounter where you need to defend yourself, you're going to need to win. You need to shoot, move, and communicate. So you need to have the right skills and equipment to be able to shoot properly. You need to have the right tactics, techniques, and procedures to be able to move effectively and not get hit. And you need to communicate. You need to have a script ahead of time prepared in your mind on what you're going to say to law enforcement when you communicate with them and you call law enforcement and ask for help, right? So what also comes with that is weapon selection. You need to have the right tool that is going to be appropriate for that context. And for most people, it's this concealed carry pistol, right? Because that is something that you can reasonably have with you every single day, and you can use that effectively to defend yourself. Something else that would be appropriate as far as weapon selection is having something like this, a handy carbine that is set up with the right implements to be effective for that most likely scenario in self-defense. Now, am I going to be carrying this on my body in a normal everyday civilian context? Absolutely not. I might throw this in the truck for the day and this will become my truck gun for the day, or this might be inside the home for home defense, whatever. That was one thing that people mentioned in the comments is like, when it comes to self-defense, most people were talking about having a home defense carbine. That's not entirely like the best case, or that's not entirely the best way to look at it. So could you use a rifle outside of your home for self-defense? Absolutely. Absolutely. That's why when I leave the house for the day, either this or my other truck gun is going to go in my truck with me. And then when I get home at the end of the day, I'm going to take it out of my truck because criminals steal guns from vehicles, and I'm going to have it in the home then. But yeah, this is a great setup for normal everyday civilian context self-defense. I've got backup iron sights on here. I've got an Aimpoint Comp M5S on top there. And then I have a weapon light so that I can positively identify what I need to shoot at. Now, the reason why I have this set up for a normal everyday life, civilian context, self-defense type situation, because this is like the worst case scenario that I would grab for. Really the 99% that I'm going to grab for normal everyday civilian self-defense is my pistol. I'm not going to reach for this first because this is something that I would need in an extreme worst case scenario inside of this normal everyday life civilian self-defense context. Now again, to caveat, we're not talking about an SHTF context right now. We're talking about just a normal everyday life civilian defensive carbine. The reason why I have an aim point on here is because literally 99.999% repeating chance of you needing to use a rifle for self-defense, it is going to be inside of 100 yards. It just is. There's only been 2 instances in recorded history where someone needed to use a firearm for self-defense past 100 yards. I'm going to pull them up on screen, but I'm also going to read them. So the first one is the UT Tower incident in Austin, Texas in 1966. Engagement distances varied between 100 yards and 300 yards. So this is the largest mass civilian long-range defensive engagement in American history. Armed citizens with deer rifles, and one was an NRA high-power rifle competitor shooting a national match M14 and 308. They pinned down Charles Whitman until private citizen Alan Crum led police up to the roof. Officer Ramiro Martinez publicly admitted that it was the armed citizens returning fire from long range who pinned down the killer and stopped the slaughter. The tower stands over 300 feet tall. Effective ground to observation deck engagement distances were between 100 and 300 yards. Not a single shooter, but multiple civilians engaging simultaneously. Whitman was killed at close range on the deck by police after citizens forced him to take cover. So that was a very, very interesting example. Literally the only other instance of needing to use a rifle that was legally justified outside of 100 yards was a story called The Hunter near Rankin, Texas. This happened in 1976, and the engagement distance was 150 yards. Trooper Sammy Long was shot and killed after making a traffic stop on US 67 near Rankin, Texas. The suspect, who was AWOL from the US Navy, I take that personally as a Navy veteran, opened fire as Trooper Long approached the vehicle, then took Long's service weapon and shot him in the back 6 times as he lay on the ground. A citizen who was an avid deer hunter returning from a hunting trip was stopped at a rest stop 150 yards from the traffic stop and witnessed the shooting. He retrieved his hunting rifle and shot the suspect at 150 yards, killing him. The state of Texas awarded the hunter 2 gold-plated .45 caliber pistols. His name was kept secret for obvious reasons. Confirmed by Officer Down memorial page, a book written by Trooper Long and Masada Ayub's research. So again, those are the two only confirmed cases that were legally justified in American history where someone needed to shoot someone beyond 100 yards. Now, some people might say, well, I might want to have an LPVO because it helps me observe better. You can see in varied lighting conditions better, etc. But it is an inarguable fact that you are faster with just a plain old red dot. They are faster and easier to use. They have less parallax issues. They can be used in varied shooting positions, which is very much a reality for like normal everyday life civilian self-defense. I might need to shoot underneath a car. I might need to shoot over top of a planter, like a flower planter downtown or something. And like I might need to be having the rifle laid as flat as possible so I can get my profile as little as possible. And that is just faster and it's more reliable to do with a plain old red dot. That's why for normal everyday life, I have a non-magnified thing on my rifle for 99.9% of what I might possibly need a rifle for. And if I do need to shoot beyond 100 yards with this rifle, I could still do that. Both of those situations that I read through, both the UT Tower incident and the incident that was titled The Hunter, I would have been able to positively deal with that situation with just a red dot. Now, would an LPVO have been more effective? Probably, but it would be more effective for literally the 0.000 like 1% chance that I might need to use a rifle for self-defense. However, there is such thing as called SHTF and preparedness for SHTF. So this is where we're going to have a hard line right here, and I want to make sure that we talk about that. Right now, we are separating normal everyday life, and we're now talking about an SHTF without rule of law type situation. And this is a point, in fact, that really kind of got spicy in some of the comments. Some of the people mentioned in the comments, like, he's talking about a red dot and how a red dot is like the thing to have because you're never going to have to use a rifle to defend yourself beyond 100 yards, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm talking about my SHTF rifle, which has a magnified optic on it. Okay, so when it comes to SHTF, and especially if you're defending like some sort of property, you really need to pick the tool based on the environment and what you plan on doing with it. And the reason why I have a magnified optic on my SHTF rifle is my plan for SHTF is to go to our family homestead and defend the homestead. Easy peasy. There is opportunity for very, very, very long shots there. And in that instance, I want something with a little bit of magnification, especially on kind of like an everyday SHTF patrolling rifle, because I might need to take a further shot, or I might need to use that magnification to observe at distance. Or I might just whip out my binoculars and observe at distance too. There's always that, or such thing as a spotting scope. So I don't necessarily need to have the spotting scope living on my everyday rifle that I plan on carrying everywhere. So the same things are going to exist in this SHTF type of situation. You need to survive, right? So you're going to need to like grow food, purify water, you need to hunt, you need to deal with animals. Like I might need to like, you know, deal with cattle, like taking care of them, whatever. There's going to be normal everyday stuff that you're going to need to do just to make sure everyone is sustained, right? I'm not necessarily going to be carrying around like, you know, some big, huge, like awkward rifle when I'm doing all that stuff. When I'm doing normal everyday stuff during like this survival type of situation, I'll probably be carrying around like a smaller, shorter, handier rifle like my truck gun. I'll just go ahead and grab that. So this is what I would select for kind of normal everyday like SHTF survival. If I'm like going to the garden and I'm going to do some gardening, probably going to bring this just because it's handier, shorter, just the easy button, right? However, in a previous video, I talked about SHTF QRF Kit, or the importance of having some sort of quick reaction force that is set up on some sort of watch bill rotation. And they would, on the day where they are supposed to be the QRF, they're wearing the plate carrier, they have a more capable rifle, and they're kind of on standby in case something happens. They can be called up and they are bringing much more effective equipment to that fight. That gardening gun that I was talking about, my CAR-15, if I'm not on QRF for the day, I'm probably just gonna be toting that thing around just because it's certainly better than a pistol. It's highly effective. It's not super specialized. It's handy. It's not heavy and cumbersome. And I'm much more likely to bring that with me more places and carry it around because it's so light and handy, right? The same things that exist in normal everyday life are going to exist in SHTF. They're just going to look a little bit different. When it comes to a fight, if someone attacks your homestead, you're going to need to win. You're going to need to shoot, move, and communicate. When it comes to the shooting aspect, you're going to need to have the right tools on hand and the right tactics, techniques, and procedures on hand to be able to win that fight. You're going to need to have friends, because it's not reasonable for you to be able to do the gardening, take care of livestock, do hunting, clean your weapon, and also like collect water and pull security all at the same time. So it's going to take a village, right? So you need to be cultivating that village now and putting together that really SHTF preparedness community now. However, when it comes to weapon selection, like I was saying before, I might need to have the ability to see things a little bit further, especially if my context is walking out this SHTF survival situation out in the sticks, in the country, on a farm, right? That's why my rifle wears an ACOG. The other reason why my rifle wears an ACOG is because this is just simply more durable than LPVOs. I am testing that primary arms PLXC, but it's still an LPVO, and they are still just more fragile than an ACOG. Now, I've seen people in the comments say like, oh gosh, like I've seen an ACOG break. When I was in the Marine Corps, I saw a guy break an ACOG. Or like when I was in the Army, I saw the fiber optic on an ACOG break. Okay. There are still thousands upon thousands upon thousands of ACOGs that took a beating during the GWOT, and they were just fine. So yes, if you reach for some sort of like niche, nuanced, like infinitesimal, like, oh, once upon a time I saw this break once. Okay. However, LPVOs, especially with the variable power magnification, there's multiple pieces of glass in there that they move in and out to create that varying effect of magnification. That complexity, more complexity always lends itself to more fragility, all right? That's really kind of why I lean towards this fixed 4-power TA31 RCO. Now, again, that's me. Do whatever floats your boat, all right? If you want to pick an LPVO, that's fine. However, if you're going to pick an LPVO for SHTF, one of the things I saw in the comments very regular is that my Trijicon TA31 RCO with my Trijicon SRO on top of it, like that's a really expensive package. And yeah, it is expensive. I mean, what the ACOG is about $1,200, the RMR or this SRO is about $600. So right there, that's $1,800 wrapped up into the optics. You would only say that that is really, really expensive and unaffordable if you're buying like a really, really cheap LPVO, like a $200 or $300 LPVO, and you can't make that comparison, all right? When I'm thinking about this being a bargain, I'm thinking about this being a bargain from a military pedigree standpoint. I'm, in my mind, comparing that to like a Night Force NX8 or like a Leupold Mark 6 or something like that. Something with an actual military pedigree, or like the Trijicon VCOG, the new thing that the Marine Corps is running. But again, all of those things are just more fragile. I would say if I ever change out to an LPVO, it's probably going to be the Trijicon VCOG, because it has the integrated mount. I know right away, right off the bat, that my reticle is going to be level and perpendicular, because it is integrated in, the optic is integrated into the mount, and it's made out of that, you know, forged aluminum space magic that the ACOG is made out of. So anyways, that is why I select an ACOG. If you want an LPVO, that's fine, but I would highly recommend you don't cheap out on it. All right, get a proper LPVO that is made from a company with a military pedigree, just to make sure you're going to give yourself the best chance of that optic actually surviving an extended condition in SHTF where your resupply is just non-existent, right? Where you can't call up the manufacturer and say like, hey, you know, my turret broke on my LPVO and I need to warranty it, all right? That's kind of the whole purpose of like why we're selecting certain things for SHTF. One of the main criteria that I'm looking for is something that's very hardy and has a reputation for being extremely tough, all right? Now, when it comes to the legalities of using deadly force in an SHTF environment, some folks in the comments had mentioned that I talk about how You're never going to need to take a shot beyond 100 yards, and that's why I have a red dot on this rifle. And then I pull up my SHTF rifle, and it has a magnified optic on it for shooting at long distances. And they called me out on that inconsistency. And yeah, maybe perhaps I should have explained that better, and that's part of the reason why we're having this video discussion right now. If one is thrust into some sort of SHTF environment, part of me thinks that maybe some people believe that there will never be a return to normal. Like it's going to be perpetual SHTF, and you're going to be able to shoot whoever you want for whatever reason you want, and there's no law and order, and law and order is never coming back. That right there is living in fantasy land. That is living in fantasy land. In every SHTF environment that you can look to for inspiration on how to think through the next SHTF situation, law and order always generally returns. Think about the financial collapse of Argentina in 2001. There's a book written about that called Surviving the Coming Financial Collapse, and it's written by a dude named Fall. That book is highly recommended by a guy named Such. He also has a preparedness channel called Sensible Prepper, and pretty much every episode that he has, he's recommending that book, and for darn good reason. It's a peek behind the window of what it looks like in a relatively modern SHTF collapse in a relatively stable and well-to-do country. Argentina was, very stable, very thriving until they had their economic collapse. And then they literally had a modern-day SHTF situation that they had to live through. And then law and order returned after the collapse kind of leveled out, right? But during that SHTF situation, there were roving bands of thugs that would roam the countryside, and they were preying on small defenseless farmers, and they were taking their resources. Sometimes they'd kill them, whatever. And that's why it's so important to have a preparedness group, right? You can't do this alone. You need people. You need people that you can trust. So just have that in the back of your mind in some sort of SHTF situation. Don't be thinking that you can be taking, 500, 600, 700-yard shots at people that aren't exhibiting some sort of active threat to yourself and your community. You're eventually going to need to answer for that, all right? Eventually, law and order is going to return. Eventually, that person's family is going to find out where they died. And then you're not necessarily dealing with the modern legal system. You're dealing with the legal system of angry and upset family members. There's also going to be social aspects to this too. If you're, taking 600, 700-yard, literally assassination shots at people, and you're killing people that aren't posing an active threat to your community, there are going to be people inside of your community that are not going to be happy with your decisions. And it's going to cause instability in your preparedness group. There's a really good fictional book that I love. It's actually a book series called Black Autumn, written by Jeff Kirkham. Jeff Kirkham and Jason, I forget his last name. Anyways, so it's written by two guys. Jeff Kirkham is the main one. And Jeff Kirkham is, I believe, a 29-year retired Green Beret. And then Jason, I forget Jason's last name, but he is basically a lifetime prepper. And those two kind of put their minds together and wrote the Black Autumn book series. There is a scene or a scenario in that book, because the long and short of it is they put together a preparedness community that is financed by Jason, who's privately wealthy, and they have this ultimate preppers compound in just outside Salt Lake City, and they have all kinds of people come. They have a bunch of military spec op guys that show up to do security. They have doctors and nurses and professional gardeners and people that are professional cattle ranchers. They have all sorts of the best minds come together to create the ultimate prepper compound, right? And there's a situation where Jeff Kirkham's character, he sets up OPLPs all around the property so that they have an extended perimeter so that they can see when bad guys are getting close before they get into the heart of the compound and people's family starts getting in danger, right? But one of the people on an OPLP accidentally shoots just a hunter that's walking around in the woods looking for deer so that he can feed his family. But yeah, one of the dudes on the OPLP like shoots a dude and kills him who is innocent. And now you're not dealing with the judgment of law and order, you're dealing with the judgment of your own community. And in that instance, that caused so much instability. Some of the people were protesting so bad that they're like, you know what, we're going to leave. Like, I think there was one of the doctors was just so upset about that. They were packing up their stuff and they're planning on leaving because of the social dynamics of the way different people look at deadly force. So you're going to need to be accountable for your actions, all right? Even if it's SHTF. And that's why something that I think would be a valuable thing to do, especially if law enforcement is not a phone call away, let's say the grid is down, I would highly recommend keeping a very detailed logbook of like when there are deadly force encounters or whenever your farm or your community is attacked. I would write down the date, the time, how many bad guys, what they did, and then like have other people in your community like literally like write a signature and sign off on it. So those are basically like signed witnesses, sign and date. And just keep a detailed logbook of stuff like that, because eventually there's going to be a sheriff again. Or maybe the sheriff is there, but there's just no way to call him. So you might have to like ride a horse into town if this is some sort of like protracted SHTF type of situation, and bring a witness and like give them that log and say like, hey, this happened. Here's everything that happened. You know, they're buried in marked graves like on the back 40. I'll take you there and show them or show you to them. But anyways, yeah, like I would highly recommend keeping very detailed notes, because eventually you're going to be held accountable for your actions, even if it's SHTF. So don't be thinking it's all of a sudden okay to, you know, like, oh, I need this, so I'm going to go steal it from the Walmart because everybody else is doing it. There's still a difference between right and wrong, even if the shiz has hit the fan. All right. That's all I got for now, guys. Thanks for watching. If you got something out of this, please make sure and like, comment, and subscribe. Get in the comments. It's really kind of it's turning into a pretty neat community down there in the comments. So jump down there, and if you have something to add to the comment section, feel free. I think that'd be awesome. So until next time, guys, train hard and carry your gun.